A designer leather shoe came down on the cleaning cloth. The sound was small, the soft compression of microfiber beneath an expensive sole, but Martha heard it. She had been polishing the brass railing at the base of the lobby stairs, the morning light coming through the Heritage's tall windows at the angle that revealed every fingerprint, every smudge, every sign of neglect. She had set the cloth on the marble floor beside her spray bottle while she worked the way she had set it there every morning for 12 years. Now Derek's shoe was on it. Martha looked at the shoe. Then she looked up. Derek was 32 years old and wore the kind of suit that announced itself before the man inside it had said a word. Expensive watch, sharp haircut, polished confidence. He had arrived at the Heritage 3 weeks earlier with a new title, a new efficiency plan, and the expression of a man constantly deciding which old things no longer deserved to stay. He looked down at Martha. "Martha," he said, "this lobby is not a storage room for people who don't know when to leave." The lobby went quiet. Leo stood at the doorman station near the entrance, one hand resting on the brass stand that had been there since 1974. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Sophie looked up from the reception desk. She was 22, new enough to be frightened of Derek, but kind enough to understand that something about this moment was wrong. Derek glanced at Martha's faded cardigan, the spray bottle, the cloth beneath his shoe. "The tenants pay a great deal to live here," he said. "They shouldn't have to walk past this every morning. Clear out your locker by noon." Martha bent down slowly. She picked up the cleaning cloth from beneath his shoe. Then she straightened and looked at the brass railing she had just finished polishing. The metal caught the morning light with the warm glow of something that had been cared for properly over many decades. Her husband Arthur had chosen those railings himself in 1974. He had stood in this lobby when the building was new and watched them installed with the attention of a man who believed small details were never small when they belonged to a home. Martha looked at the railing for one more second. Then she turned toward the elevator. Leo watched her from the doorman's station, his expression unchanged, the expression of a man who knew the full picture and was waiting for the correct moment. Martha reached into the pocket of her faded cardigan. She took out a key. Brass! Old. Tarnished from use. The kind of master key made for a building that had been built to last? Derek saw it and smiled faintly as if it proved his point. To him it looked like a janitor's key. He did not know it opened every door in the Heritage. He did not know it opened the penthouse. He did not know it opened the ownership office at the top of the building where a meeting had been scheduled for 1 o'clock that afternoon. A meeting Derek had been chasing since his first week. The meeting with the building's owner. Martha pressed the elevator button with the brass key still in her hand. The doors opened. She stepped inside without looking back. And Derek, still standing in the lobby with his polished shoes and his perfect suit, had no idea he had just fired the woman who owned the building. Martha arrived at the Heritage at 6 in the morning, which was when she had always arrived, which was before the building knew it was awake. The lobby held the particular quality of a large space in the early morning, the marble floor catching the first light through the tall windows and throwing it back in long, pale rectangles, the air still and cool, the brass railings waiting. Martha set her small bag by the cabinet behind the front desk and took out the spray bottle and the polishing cloth and went to the railings the way she went to them every morning, the way you go to something you have been going to for so long that the going is its own form of conversation. She worked from the bottom of the stairs upward, the cloth moving in the small circular pattern that Arthur had shown her in 1974 when the railings were new, and he had said, "You have to work with the grain of the metal." Marty not against it. The metal remembers how it wants to be treated. She had worked with the grain ever since. The brass under her hands had the warmth of something well kept, the particular warmth of metal that has been attended to over many decades with the specific attention that prevents deterioration. Leo arrived at 6:45. He came in through the service entrance the way he had come in for 22 years, hung his coat on the hook inside the doorman's station, and settled into the morning. He was 68 years old, and he had the unhurried quality of someone who understood that his job was to be present rather than to perform presence, and he was very good at it. He came to the railing and reached for the second cloth in Martha's bag. She said, "I have it, Leo." He said, "You don't have to do the whole length yourself." She said, "It keeps my hands busy." Keeps me close to Arthur. Leo set the cloth down and looked at her for a moment with the expression he kept for the things he understood completely and did not need to say anything about. Then he went back to the doorman's station, and the morning continued. A young mother came through at 7:15 with the particular controlled urgency of someone managing a stroller and a toddler, and a bag that was trying to fall off her shoulder, and a timeline that was already being negotiated. Martha set down her spray bottle and held the stroller's front wheel clear of the door threshold, while the mother navigated through, and the toddler looked at Martha with the frank assessment of young children and said something that was mostly vowels. And Martha said good morning to you too, and the mother said thank you, Mrs. Martha, you're a lifesaver. And they went out into the morning. Martha went to the peace lily. It stood in the corner of the lobby near the east window in the large ceramic pot that had been there since 1989, a plant of considerable age and considerable presence that Martha tended the way she tended everything in the heritage, with attention and without announcement. She crouched beside it and looked at the leaves in the morning light. One was withered, not dead yet, but going the particular yellow-green of a leaf that has decided it is finished. Martha touched it gently. She said quietly to the plant and to no one I know, "We'll sort it out." She took the small pruning scissors from her cardigan pocket and removed the leaf cleanly and put it in her bag. Then she misted the soil and straightened up. Derek came through the main entrance at 7:47. He came in the way he came in every morning, with the forward momentum of a man who has assessed his environment and found it slow and is compensating. He did not look at Leo. He checked his watch as he crossed the lobby, the expensive watch that he checked not because he needed the time, but because checking it was a statement about time and its value. He saw Martha near the peace lily with her spray bottle. He stopped. He looked at her, at the faded gray cardigan and the spray bottle and the small bag on the floor near the cabinet, with the expression of a man who has identified an inefficiency and is preparing to address it. He walked over. He said, "What's your employee ID number?" Martha looked at him. She looked at him with the expression she had been using since he arrived 3 weeks ago, the expression of a woman conducting a quiet and thorough assessment of something that had been placed in her building and was not yet certain whether it belonged there. She said, "I don't have one." Derek said, "Then you shouldn't be in this lobby at 7:47 in the morning with a spray bottle." Martha said, "I've been in this lobby at 6 every morning for 12 years. Derek said, "That ends today." He looked at Leo across the lobby. He said, "Efficiency starts with the staff, Leo. Why is this woman still here?" Leo said, "She's been here longer than all of us, sir." Derek looked at Leo the way he looked at things that offered responses he had not requested. He said, "Have her ID processed by noon or have her out." He turned back toward the elevator. He had not asked her name. He had seen the cardigan and the spray bottle and the plant and had made his assessment in the time it took him to cross the lobby, and he had not asked a single question. It was the first mistake of many. Martha watched him go. She picked up the spray bottle. She was not offended. Offense required surprise, and Martha had not been surprised by anything in a very long time. She was evaluating as she had been evaluating since Derek arrived. The way you evaluate something you have introduced into a system, you are responsible for watching it move through the space and noting what it touched and how it touched it. So far, the results were not encouraging. She went back to the railing. The brass caught the morning light the way it always caught it, warm and patient. The metal that Arthur had sourced and installed and said would outlast both of them, which it had and which she intended to see, continue outlasting everyone who underestimated what they were standing in. Derek held the staff meeting at 8 o'clock in the small conference room off the lobby that had been used for staff meetings since the Heritage opened, and that Derek had already described in Martha's hearing as undersized and in need of repurposing. Sophie and Leo sat across the table from him. Derek stood at the head of it with his tablet, the way he stood in all rooms, with the forward lean of someone who considers standing still a form of lost momentum. He said the Heritage is a luxury brand. We are here to operate it like one. That means we are cutting the dead weight. He swiped through something on the tablet. He said rent structure. Current rates are 18% below comparable buildings in this corridor. We are adjusting by 20% across the board, effective next quarter with appropriate notice to current tenants. Sophie said some of these tenants have been here for 20 years. A 20% increase on top of their current rate is going to be difficult for some of them. Derek said renters are customers, not family. Customers who cannot afford the product find a different product. That is not our concern. Sophie looked at the table. Leo looked at Derek with the expression he had been using since Derek arrived, the expression of a man who has seen many things come through this building over 22 years and is currently watching one of them and keeping his assessment to himself for the time being. Derek swiped again. He said amenities. The community garden on the roof, the lending library in the second-floor common room, the monthly tenant gatherings in the lobby. These are consuming staff time and building resources for no measurable return. They are being discontinued. Sophie said the tenants use those things every day. Derek said tenants use them because we offer them. We stop offering them, tenants adjust. He looked up from the tablet. This is not a community center. It is a residential property investment. He walked to the conference room window that overlooked the lobby below. He said, "And that woman?" "Martha. Leo tells me she helps around the building. She doesn't have an employee. She doesn't appear on any payroll, and she is present in the lobby before 8 in the morning talking to houseplants." He said it with a specific disdain of someone identifying something that offends their sense of order. "Starting today, I want her out of the lobby before the business day begins." The meeting ended without further objection because Sophie did not have the standing yet to offer objection that would hold, and Leo had never been a man who used words when waiting served better. Martha was in the lobby when Derek came out. She was in the armchair near the Peace Lily, the one that had been there since the Heritage opened, reading a small book with her cardigan around her shoulders and her spray bottle on the table beside her. She had been there for the last 20 minutes. The conference room's interior window faced the lobby, and the conference room's door had not been fully closed. Derek stopped when he saw her. He said, "I thought I made myself clear about the lobby hours." "Martha said you were speaking to Sophie and Leo. I'm not on the staff." Derek said, "You are also not a tenant in good standing, which means you have no reason to occupy the lobby furniture during business hours." Martha said the plants need water twice a day, morning and late afternoon, the peace lily particularly in the dry season. Derek looked at the peace lily. He looked at it the way he looked at the community garden and the lending library and the monthly tenant gatherings with the assessment of someone measuring square footage against return. He said the plants are going to the landfill. We're putting in digital displays. Plants require maintenance. Digital displays require a service contract once a year. Martha looked at him. She said the future looks very cold from where you're standing. Derek said digital displays don't need water and they don't talk back. That's the future of hospitality design. He said it with the confidence of a man who has read something in a trade publication and has converted it into conviction. He walked toward the elevator. He said, "Have your things out of the lobby by 8 tomorrow morning." Martha watched him go. She sat in the armchair for a moment after the elevator doors closed. Then she stood and went to the peace lily and gave it the rest of the water in her spray bottle, working slowly around the base of the pot, checking the soil with one finger, assessing what it needed, and making a note in the way she made notes about everything in the small, careful archive of her attention. Then she went to Unit 2B. Her apartment was what she had made it in 12 years of living close to the ground, which was exactly what she needed and nothing more. The kitchen was small and the furniture was old, and the windows looked out on the interior courtyard, rather than the street which she had chosen specifically, because the courtyard had the oak tree that Arthur had insisted on planting in 1979, and she liked to see it. She went to the shelf above the kitchen table. She took down the 1974 maintenance ledger. It was a large book, the cover worn soft with age, the spine reinforced with tape that had long since gone the color of old honey. She set it on the table and opened it to the first page, the page with the original tenant list in Arthur's handwriting, the names of the people who had come to the Heritage when it was new, many of them gone now and some of them still here, their names in the ledger the way names stayed in the ledger, permanent and cared for. She ran her hand across the page. Then she looked at the photograph on the wall above the table. Black and white 1974, a young couple standing at a construction site, the woman in a light coat and the man in a hard hat, both of them looking at the camera with the expression of people who understand that what is being built is not just a building. She and Arthur. The heritage groundbreaking. Martha looked at the photograph for a long moment. Then she reached for her phone. She dialed a number she knew without looking. Elias answered on the second ring. She said, "Elias, it's time for the quarterly review." She paused. "Tell the board I'll be there in person." She said it looking at the groundbreaking photograph at Arthur in his hard hat at the ground they had broken together 50 years ago and that she had been tending ever since. He had called the plants trash. He did not realize he had just described his own career. Derek arrived at 8:15 with the investor beside him. The investor's name was Mr. Calloway, and he was the kind of man whose shoes announced his net worth before he said anything, and Derek was giving him the tour that Derek had been planning since his first week, the tour designed to communicate that the heritage was a building in transformation, moving from its current state of what Derek called comfortable underperformance toward what he called its full market potential. The lobby was the first stop. It was the lobby at its best hour. The morning light fully established the marble, catching at the brass, doing what the brass did when it had been properly maintained, which was to make the entire space feel warm and considered. This was what Derek had planned to show Mr. Calloway. The bones of the building, the potential of the space, the argument for the investment. Then he saw Martha. She was at the Peace Lily, with her spray bottle, her back to the entrance, working in the unhurried way she worked, checking the leaves one by one with the attention of someone who understood that the checking was the care, the whole thing not different from how she cleaned the brass or how she spoke to tenants complete and without performance. Derek's jaw tightened. He crossed the lobby without adjusting his pace for Calloway, who had to shorten his stride to keep up. He reached Martha, and he reached for the spray bottle, and he took it from her hand in the quick, decisive motion of a man removing something that should not be there. The bottle hit the marble. It cracked along the side, a clean fracture from the impact, and the water spread in a slow, irregular shape across the stone, reaching toward the grout lines, finding its level. Martha looked at the water on the marble, then she looked at Derek. Derek said, "I told you to stay in your unit." He said it at a volume that was not quite a shout, but was in the territory of a voice that has decided not to manage itself. He said, "You're making this place look like a nursing home. Go back to 2B before I have you evicted for loitering." The lobby absorbed this. Calloway stood several feet behind Derek with the expression of a man who has walked into a situation he was not briefed on and is recalibrating. Sophie had both hands flat on the reception desk, and her eyes were bright with something she was containing with visible effort. Leo moved. He stepped out from the doorman station and came forward, not quickly, with the particular, deliberate pace of a man who has decided to be present in a specific way. He said, "That's enough, sir." Derek turned. He said, "Stay back, Leo, or you're next." Leo stopped. He stood where he was with his hands at his sides and his face composed in the way of a man who is choosing carefully and with full awareness of what he is choosing to wait. His jaw was tight. His eyes were on Derek with an expression that had several things in it, and the thing that was most present was not anger, but a kind of long patience arriving at its end. Martha bent down. She picked up the broken spray bottle from the marble. She held the two pieces together in her hands for a moment, and then she set them on the small table beside the peace lily. Then she wiped the water from her shoe with the cloth from her pocket slowly, with the precision she applied to everything. She looked up at Derek. She said, "Eviction is a very serious process, Derek. You should be careful how you use that word." Derek looked at her. He looked at the cardigan and the cloth and the broken bottle and the spreading water on the marble and Calloway behind him, and he made the calculation that men make when they are performing confidence for an audience and have committed too far to stop. He said, "You're just a tenant, Martha. One of many. You're replaceable. I'm not." Martha looked at him. She said, "Everyone is replaceable, Derek. Some people just haven't met their replacement yet." Derek laughed. It was the laugh of a man who has decided the exchange is beneath him and is closing it. He said, "I'm the manager. I use whatever words I want. Get out." Martha held his gaze for a moment longer. She was not angry in the way that people are angry when they are surprised. She was something else. the quality she had maintained since Derek arrived, the assessment of someone watching a situation develop that she had been prepared for, that she had seen coming in the way you see coming the things you have been watching for. She turned toward the elevator, not toward the hallway that led to 2B, toward the elevator. She pressed the button and the doors opened and she stepped in and the doors closed. Derek turned back to Calloway. He said apologies for that. Part of the transition process. We're bringing the heritage up to the standard its address demands. Some of the older elements are being phased out. Calloway looked at the water still spreading on the marble. He looked at the peace lily and the broken spray bottle on the table beside it, and the doorman standing in the middle of the lobby with his hands at his sides, and his expression containing several things. He said, of course. He said it in the tone of a man who has revised his assessment of a situation and is not yet sure what the revision means, but is filing it carefully. Behind the reception desk, Sophie found a cloth and came out to wipe the water from the marble, working quietly and without comment. And when she straightened, she looked at the elevator doors for a moment with the expression of someone who has understood something they did not have complete words for. The lobby settled back into its morning. Derek had thought he was showing the investor how he handled problems. He was showing the owner why he had to go. Derek had his presentation open on his laptop at 9 a.m, and he was working through it with the satisfaction of a man who is prepared for something and is confident in the preparation. Project Modernization. 47 slides, the Heritage Efficiency Initiative, Phase 1. The slides were clean, and the typography was the kind that communicated seriousness, and the data visualizations showed the gap between the Heritage's current performance and its projected performance after Derek's changes had been implemented, which was to say, after the community garden was removed, and the lending library was cleared, and the monthly tenant gatherings were discontinued, and 12 of the current 23 staff positions were restructured, which was the word Derek used in the presentation for eliminated. He fixed his tie in the small mirror he kept in the desk drawer and looked at himself and was satisfied with what he saw. He called Patricia. She answered on the second ring with the background sounds of their apartment in the morning, and Derek leaned back in his chair and said, "The chairwoman is coming today." The actual owner. She's been apparently largely absent from operations, and today she's doing a quarterly review in person. And I have been explicitly told this is the meeting. Patricia said, "Are you nervous?" Derek said, "I'm prepared." There's a difference. He said, "I've built a case that any serious business person will recognize as exactly right for this building at this moment. If I can land this today, regional VP is not out of the question by end of year." Patricia said, "What about that woman from this morning, the one you told me about?" Derek said, "Handled." He said it with the brevity of someone filing a resolved matter. "You have to show these people who's the boss, Patricia. If you let them think the lines are negotiable, you lose the operation." He straightened his tie one more time. "I'll call you after." He went back to the presentation. Slide 14. Staff restructuring and cost efficiency. He had spent considerable time on this slide. In the penthouse at the same hour, the morning light came through the tall windows at the angle that revealed the city below, in the particular way of a high floor, the streets reduced to pattern, and the buildings arranged in the logic of a place that had been built over many decades by many people with many intentions, some of which had lasted, and some of which had not. Martha stood at the window for a moment. Then she went to the bedroom. The gray cardigan was on the chair where she had left it, the spray bottle and the polishing cloth on the small table beside it. She looked at them for a moment. Then she went to the wardrobe and opened it. The black suit had been there for several years. She took it out and laid it on the bed and looked at it the way you look at something you have been keeping for the right occasion and have arrived at the right occasion. It was well made, the kind of suit that had been made when suits were made to last, with the quality of fabric and construction that did not announce itself but was visible to anyone who knew what they were looking at. She dressed carefully. She went to the jewelry box on the dresser. The pearls were in the small velvet pouch where they had been since the last time she wore them, which had been 3 years ago at the last board meeting she had attended in person. Arthur had given them to her on their 50th anniversary, sitting at the table in the small restaurant where they had eaten on their first date. And he had said, "You have been the best partner a man could ask for Marty, and I'm only sorry I didn't say it more often." She had said, "You say it every time you come home." He had looked at her and said, "I hope that's true." She put on the pearls. Then she went to the safe. It was behind the panel in the study, the one that looked like part of the wall, and was part of the wall until it wasn't. And she opened it with the combination she had kept in her memory since 1974. Inside was the original deed, the document signed by her and Arthur at the closing in December of that year, the paper that had been the beginning of everything the heritage had become. She took it out and held it for a moment. Then she put it back. She did not need to bring it to the meeting. She knew what it said. Elias was in the sitting room when she came out. He was 65 years old, and he had been handling Martha's legal affairs for 22 years, since the attorney before him retired, and recommended Elias with the specific endorsement of someone passing something important to someone worthy of it. He was reading Derek's efficiency report, which Martha had forwarded to him the previous evening after receiving it from the management company's internal system, and his expression as he read it had the quality of a man encountering something that confirms a concern he had already formed. He set the report on the table when Martha came in. He said the staff restructuring alone would breach 3 of the Heritage's founding operational covenants. The community amenity removals would breach 2 more. He paused. And the rent increase structure applied to tenants with existing long-term agreements would expose the building to significant legal challenge. Martha said he wants to take the soul out of the building, Elias. Arthur wouldn't have allowed it. Elias said, "You have the authority to stop all of it. But Martha, you have to reveal yourself." He looked at her steadily. The chairwoman of the board cannot remain anonymous in this situation. Martha looked at the window in the city below it, and thought about Arthur at the groundbreaking in 1974 in his hard hat, saying, "We're going to build something that lasts, Marty, something that takes care of people, the way buildings used to take care of people." She said, "I've been watching this building for 12 years in a gray cardigan because I believed the best way to protect it was to be invisible, to see it as it really was." She paused. "I was hoping I'd never have to be visible." Elias said, "Are you ready?" Martha looked at her reflection in the window glass, the black suit and the pearls, and the woman she had always been underneath the cardigan she had chosen to wear. She said, "I've been ready for 40 years, Elias. I was just hoping I'd never have to be." She picked up the brass master key from the table. She put it in the pocket of the black suit. Downstairs, Derek was on slide 22, Staff Morale and the Cost of Sentiment. He was very pleased with this slide. Outside the penthouse door, the small placard that Elias's assistant had placed that morning caught the light. Heritage Holdings Board. Quarterly Review. Chairwoman M. Holloway presiding. The gray cardigan had been a choice. The black suit was a consequence. Derek was about to meet the consequence. Elias opened the penthouse door at 1 o'clock exactly. Derek was standing in the hallway with his tablet under his arm and his presentation cued and his tie straight, and the particular expression of a man who has prepared for something and is experiencing the slight elevation of controlled anticipation. He had spent the morning rehearsing the key points, and he had decided which slides to linger on and which to move through quickly. And he had a story prepared for the opening, a story about the Heritage's untapped potential that he had told twice already to people who had responded well to it. Elias said, "The board is ready for you, Derek." Derek said, "Excellent." He straightened his jacket and went in. The boardroom was large in the way of rooms that have been designed for a specific purpose and have fulfilled that purpose for many years. The mahogany table ran the length of it, dark and solid, the kind of furniture built in an era that understood permanence as a value rather than a liability. The chairs were ranged along both sides, empty 8 of them, and at the far end of the table, facing the window, one chair with its back to the room. Derek took in the empty chairs. He said, "Am I early?" Elias said the chairwoman prefers a direct conversation for the initial review. "Please present as you would to the full board. She'll have questions." Derek said, "Of course." He set his tablet on the table and pulled up the first slide and looked at the back of the chair at the head of the table and said, "Thank you for making time today. I've been looking forward to this conversation since I arrived at the Heritage." What I've found here is a building with extraordinary bones and a management approach that has, with respect, left significant value on the table. The chair did not move. Derek took this as attentiveness and continued. He moved through the opening slides with the practiced confidence of his rehearsal, the revenue analysis and the market comparison and the gap between current performance and projected performance. He had the rhythm of it, now the points landing in their order, and he warmed to the material the way he always warmed to it in rooms where he was the one standing. He said the heritage has been operated, and I say this with full respect for the history of the building on a model that prioritizes sentiment over performance. Community amenities that consume resources without generating measurable return. Staff ratios that reflect a different era of service expectations. A tenant profile that has not been actively managed toward the premium demographic this address commands. He clicked to the next slide. He said, I've begun addressing some of these inefficiencies immediately. The community garden on the roof is being cleared this week. The lending library materials are being donated. The monthly tenant events are suspended pending review. He paused for a listener's response. None came. He said, and I want to address something that illustrates the broader challenge. The lobby. He pulled up a slide that showed lobby utilization metrics, which he had assembled from his own observations and had formatted to look more comprehensive than they were. He said, I've been dealing with what I'd call a lobby problem. A woman, a current tenant in 2B, has been occupying the lobby space as if it were her personal area. Talking to the plants, polishing railings, generally creating the impression that the heritage is managed by a resident who doesn't understand the building's positioning. He laughed. It was a short laugh, the kind that invites the listener to share the mild absurdity of what is being described. He said, I dealt with her this morning. Firmly. She's been informed that the lobby is not her personal garden and that the building has moved on from the kind of management by sentiment that allowed this situation to develop. He paused. Between us, she seemed to genuinely believe she had some kind of claim on the place. These long-term tenants, they develop an attachment that can become a real operational problem. The chair was still. Derek clicked to the next slide. Staff restructuring. He began moving through the projected staff reductions, the positions he had identified as redundant, the savings the reductions would generate. He said in the 2B situation points to a broader tenant profile issue. The heritage has a number of long-term tenants at below-market rates whose presence is inconsistent with the premium rebrand. These are good people, but they are frankly legacy occupants from a different era. We need to begin a managed transition toward a tenant base that reflects where the building is going, rather than where it has been. He looked at the back of the chair. He said, I know that sounds direct, but I think the chairwoman will appreciate directness. These decisions are never easy, but they are necessary for the building to reach its potential. He clicked to the next slide. The chair began to turn. Slowly. Derek continued talking. He was 3 sentences into his commentary on revenue optimization when some peripheral awareness registered the movement and his words began to slow in the way that words slow when the speaker's attention has been divided. He finished the sentence. He looked at the chair. It had turned halfway. Derek said the projected revenue increase over the first 18 months would represent a significant return on the investment in rebranding and the costs associated with the transition of both staff and tenants. The chair completed its turn. Martha sat at the head of the table. She was wearing the black suit and the pearl earrings, and she had the 1974 maintenance ledger on the table in front of her, the worn leather cover and the reinforced spine, and the decades of careful record in Arthur's handwriting and her own. Her hands were folded on top of it. Her posture was the posture she had always had, completely straight, the posture of a woman who had been in this building since before any of the people in this room had heard of it. She was looking at Derek with the expression she had maintained in the lobby that morning when he took the spray bottle from her hand and told her to go back to 2B. The expression had not changed. It had simply been given the correct room. Derek's tablet slipped from his hand. It hit the mahogany table and skidded several inches before stopping, and the sound of it was the only sound in the boardroom. Martha said, I believe you were telling us about the lobby problem, Derek. She said it the way she said everything, without inflection that required a response, and without the edge that would have made it a confrontation rather than an observation. She said, "Please, continue. I'm very interested in your solution for 2B. Derek stood at the other end of the mahogany table from the woman he had told to clear out her locker by noon, the woman he had called an eyesore, the woman he had threatened with eviction, the woman whose spray bottle he had knocked to the floor in front of an investor, and he understood in the specific and total way that certain understandings arrive all at once and without partial credit that he was standing in her building. He had called her a squatter. He was standing in her living room. He had no slide for this. "Derek," said Martha. His voice came out at a register he had not intended. He said, "I didn't know. I was following the guidelines. The efficiency protocols are standard practice for a building in this position, and I was implementing them in good faith." Martha looked at him. She opened the 1974 maintenance ledger. She turned to a page near the middle one she had clearly found before the page marked with a thin strip of paper that had been there for some years. She read without looking up. She said Mrs. Higgins in 4C. She moved in with her husband in 1976. He died in 1982, a Tuesday morning in March, and by Wednesday afternoon Arthur had reduced her rent by half. She looked up. "Do you know why he did that, Derek?" Derek said because it was bad business practice that eroded the building's revenue position. Martha looked at him. She said because in 1974, when Arthur was building this place, when the construction was behind schedule and the financing was uncertain, and Arthur was working 18-hour days and coming home too tired to eat, Mrs. Higgins used to bring him soup every Tuesday. She paused. "This building is made of soup and kindness, Derek, not marble and spreadsheets. The marble came later. The soup was here first." Derek opened his mouth. Elias set a document on the table. He said it with the quiet precision of a man who has been waiting for the correct moment and has arrived at it and is not in any hurry. He opened it to a page tabbed with a yellow marker and turned it to face Derek and pointed to a section that had been highlighted in the particular yellow of something that someone had read carefully and wanted to find again quickly. He said, "Page 7 of your management contract. Section 4, paragraph 3. The character clause." Derek looked at the document. Elias said the heritage was established with a founding management covenant which is incorporated by reference into every management contract this building has ever issued. The covenant specifies that the manager of the heritage serves not only as an operational director, but as a steward of the building's character and community. He read from the highlighted section. Any conduct by the manager that publicly humiliates, threatens, or diminishes the dignity of a tenant staff member or regular visitor constitutes a material breach of the stewardship covenant and grounds for immediate termination of the management agreement. Derek said that clause is 40 years old. Elias said it was renewed in every management contract since 1974, including yours, which you signed 11 weeks ago. He paused. "We have the signed copy." Derek looked at the contract and then at Martha and then at Elias. He said the investor. "I was managing a situation in front of an important investor. I needed to present the building as professionally run." She was in the lobby with a spray bottle talking to a houseplant. Martha said nothing. Derek said the market demands a certain image. I was protecting the heritage's brand positioning. If the board understood the competitive landscape we're operating in, they would recognize that my actions were necessary. Martha said the investor you were with this morning. Derek said yes. Martha said Mr. Calloway has been a tenant on the 8th floor for 9 years. He knew exactly who I was when he walked in this morning. She paused. He called me 2 hours ago. He wanted to make sure I was all right. He also mentioned that he is reconsidering his tenancy, given the current management direction. Derek sat down. He sat down the way a person sits when their legs have made the decision before their mind has caught up, and he looked at the table and then at the document in front of him. Martha reached into the drawer of the credenza beside her chair. She took out the cracked spray bottle. She set it on the mahogany table. The plastic split along one side sat on the dark wood between her and Derek, the heritage's most expensive table, and its most humble object, and the contrast did not require commentary. Martha said you broke more than a plastic bottle yesterday, Derek. You broke a 40-year promise. Derek looked at the spray bottle. He said, I can replace the bottle. I can send an apology to the tenant. I can restructure the communication approach and revisit the staff interaction protocols. He was finding his language again, the language of management of issues that had solutions and solutions that had frameworks. He said, I can make this right. The efficiency work is sound, Martha. The financial case is real. I can do this job differently. Martha said, you said I was replaceable, Derek. Derek said that was said in the heat of the moment. I recognize that was inappropriate. I'm willing to address that directly with you and with the building. Martha said, I've spent all night thinking about that. She paused. And I've decided you were right about yourself? Derek looked at her. Martha stood. She was not tall, had never been tall, and Derek was a young man with the height and the build of someone who had been physically confident his whole life. But she stood at the head of the mahogany table in the black suit and the pearls her husband had given her on their 50th anniversary, and she looked at Derek across the ledger and the contract and the broken spray bottle, and she was entirely without uncertainty, which was its own kind of size. She said this building was built on the understanding that the people inside it mattered more than the numbers around them. Arthur understood that. Every manager before you understood that. She said you understood the numbers and you mistook them for the whole picture. She walked toward him. She was much shorter than he was. He did not feel taller. She stopped at the side of the table where he was sitting, and she picked up his management contract from the table in front of him, and she held it for a moment and looked at him over it. She said you thought you were being efficient, Derek. She set the contract back down. You were actually being a vandal. She said it the way she said most things, with the flatness of a simple, observable fact. She said, and I don't tolerate vandals in Arthur's building. Derek picked up his briefcase. He picked it up with the motion of a man who has decided that the situation has concluded and is implementing the conclusion, the forward movement of someone who has processed what happened and arrived at the next step. He said, I understand. I'll have my office cleared by end of day. You'll have my resignation on Monday. Martha said, I'm not firing you, Derek. Derek stopped. He said, I'm sorry. Martha said, you have a 3-year management contract with the Heritage. Ironclad as your attorney was kind enough to note when we negotiated the terms. She paused. I don't break contracts. Arthur didn't believe in breaking contracts, and neither do I. Derek set the briefcase down slowly. He said, then what exactly is happening? Martha said you wanted to understand the lobby. You wanted to know why I was there with a spray bottle every morning. You told Leo it was inefficient, and you told the investor it was embarrassing, and you told me to clear out my locker. She looked at him. Now you'll understand it from the inside. Derek said, I don't follow. Elias set a single sheet of paper on the table. He said, effective immediately. The Heritage is restructuring the management position under the terms of the operational covenant, which allows the board to reassign managerial duties in cases of covenant breach without terminating the underlying contract. Your compensation remains unchanged. Your title and responsibilities do not. Derek looked at the paper. Elias said your new title is Junior Maintenance Associate. Your reporting structure changes accordingly. Derek said Junior Maintenance. Martha said you wanted efficiency. This is efficient. Your contract is honored, the building's covenant is enforced, and the Heritage gets exactly the education it needs from its management team. She paused. Everyone learns something. Derek said, I have a business degree. I have 7 years of property management experience. She looked at the paper, 7 years of property management experience, and she is asking me to polish railings. Martha said, I'm asking you to learn what the railings are for. She went to the door of the boardroom and opened it. Leo was in the hallway. He was standing with the particular stillness he had maintained all morning, the stillness of a man who had watched everything that happened in the lobby since 7:45 and had kept his own counsel about it and was now being invited to speak. Martha said, Leo. She said, this is Derek, the new junior maintenance associate. He'll be working under your supervision effective this afternoon. Leo looked at Derek. His expression did not change, not toward satisfaction, and not toward anything that could be called triumph, because Leo was not a man who expressed himself in those registers. He simply looked at Derek with the complete neutral assessment of someone who has been doing a job with full attention for a long time and is now being asked to teach it. He said, "I'll show you where we keep the supplies." Derek stood in the boardroom with his briefcase beside him and his expensive suit and his tablet with the 47 slides of project modernization, and he looked at Leo, and he looked at Martha, and he looked at Elias, who was organizing the papers on the mahogany table with the unhurried care of a man whose work here was substantially complete. Derek said, "I have to work under the doorman." Martha said, "You have to work under the man who has kept this building's entrance welcoming for 22 years, and who knows every tenant by name, and has never once in 22 years made a single one of them feel unwelcome." She paused. "You could learn a great deal from him." Derek looked at the maintenance vest that Leo was now holding extended toward him, the simple dark vest with the Heritage's small logo on the left chest, the vest worn by the building's maintenance staff. He took it. He held it for a moment. Then he put it on. Martha said, "Leo, show the new associate where we keep the polish." She paused. "And Leo, make sure he doesn't miss the spots under the handrails. Arthur was very particular about those." Leo said, "Yes, Mrs. Holloway." He said it the way he had always said things to her, with the ease of 22 years of mutual respect, and he turned and walked toward the elevator, and Derek in his maintenance vest over his business suit followed him. Martha watched them go. Then she turned to Sophie, who had been standing in the doorway of the boardroom since Elias had asked her to come up 20 minutes ago, wearing the expression of someone who has been watching a situation resolve itself in a way they had hoped for, but had not expected. Martha said, "Sophie." Sophie said, "Yes, Mrs. Holloway." Martha took the folded item from the credenza drawer and held it out. It was a blazer, navy well-made with the Heritage's logo on the small pin attached to the lapel, the logo that had been on the building's materials since 1974, the small architectural drawing of the Heritage's facade that Arthur had designed himself. Martha said the assistant manager position has been vacant since the previous occupant moved to another city 8 months ago. The role involves tenant relations, lobby oversight, and staff coordination. She paused. "I've been watching you since you arrived 6 weeks ago. You offered me a chair when no one else did. You learned the tenants' names in your first week." She paused again. "You noticed the peace lily." Sophie took the blazer with both hands. She said, "I don't know what to say." Martha said, "Say you'll take care of the building." Sophie said, "I will." She said it with the simplicity of someone who means something completely. Martha nodded. He had come for a vice president's seat. He left with a bottle of brass polish and a maintenance vest over a business suit, and Leo's measured supervision and the daily company of everyone he had dismissed. Martha called it education. Derek descending in the elevator with Leo standing in silence as the floors counted down toward the lobby, and the railings and the long afternoon ahead of him would have used a different word. 1 month later, the lobby of the Heritage was exactly what it had always been, which was to say warm and attended to and lit in the morning by the light that came through the tall windows and found the brass and found the marble and found the peace lily in the corner and made the whole space feel like something that had been thought about rather than simply built. Derek was on his knees at the base of the stairs. He was working the lower section of the railing, the part that required crouching, the part that was easy to miss if you were polishing standing up, and harder to reach but visible from the lobby floor to anyone who looked at the right angle. Leo had pointed this out on the 3rd day without emphasis, simply as information. Derek had been doing the lower section properly since the 4th day. His tie was gone. He had stopped wearing it in the 2nd week not as a defeat, but as a practical decision because the work required bending and the tie got in the way. His jacket was hung on the hook in the maintenance closet. He was wearing the vest and his good trousers and his expensive shoes, which had developed a new quality over the past month, the quality of shoes that have been worn while doing actual work and have the marks of it. A tenant came through the lobby. It was Mr. Patterson from the 6th floor, the retired professor who had lived in the Heritage for 14 years and who had a habit of nodding to the staff in the specific way of someone who had been taught that acknowledging people was a form of respect and had maintained the habit long after the teaching. Derek looked up from the railing. He nodded back. Mr. Patterson said good morning. Derek said good morning, Mr. Patterson. Mr. Patterson went to the elevator and Derek went back to the railing, and Leo at the doorman's station did not change his expression, but there was something in his posture that was slightly different from what it had been a month ago. A very small reduction in the particular vigilance of a man watching someone he is not yet sure about. Martha came through the lobby at 8:15. She was wearing the gray cardigan. She had the spray bottle in her left hand and the small bag over her shoulder, and she moved through the lobby in the unhurried way she had always moved through it, the way of someone for whom this space was not a place to cross, but a place to be in. And the lobby received her, the way it always received her, which was the way a place receives someone who belongs in it. She stopped at the peace lily. She stood in front of it and looked at it, and was still for a moment. The plant had been struggling for weeks, the leaf she had removed the morning of Derek's arrival, having been the first visible signal of a deeper stress, the combined effect of inconsistent watering and the change in the lobby's light and the general disturbance of the period since. She had been tending it carefully, the twice-daily watering and the particular attention to the soil's moisture and the adjustment of the pot's position to catch more of the morning light. The peace lily was blooming. A single white flower had opened in the night, the spadix and the spathe that the plant produced when it was healthy, and content the white that was not quite white, but had the warmth of something living in it. The color of the flower that the peace lily made, when it was doing what it was meant to do. Martha stood in front of it for a long moment. Then she heard the sound of the polishing cloth on the lower railing, and she turned. Derek was looking at the plant. He had stopped polishing, and he was looking at the peace lily from where he was crouching at the base of the stairs, at the white flower in the morning light, and his expression had something in it that had not been there when he arrived. Something that was not quite recognition, but was on the way to it, the beginning of an understanding that certain things in a building were not decorative. He looked at Martha. He said it's doing well. Martha said it's a good flower, isn't it, Derek? He said it is. He paused. It's doing well. He said it simply, without the management language, without the efficiency framework, without the positioning of a man who has an agenda for every statement. He said it the way you say something when you are just saying it, because it is true. And true, things deserve to be said plainly. Martha looked at the flower for another moment. Then she looked at Derek. She said I saw from the elevator yesterday, the lower section of the third railing. You got the spot Arthur liked. Derek said I found it. It's at an angle. You have to come at it from below. Martha said yes. He used to say you had to earn that spot every morning. Derek looked at the railing. He said I got it. Martha said, I know you did, son. She said it the way she said most things plainly and without more than was needed, and the word son was in it. The way certain words are in certain sentences, when the speaker has not entirely decided to include them, and they arrive anyway, which told both of them something about where the month had put them. She picked up her spray bottle and gave the peace lily its morning water, checking the soil with one finger, tilting the pot slightly to ensure the drainage was moving, doing what she had done every morning for 12 years with the same attention and the same care. Derek went back to the railing. The lobby moved through its morning around both of them, the tenants coming and going, Sophie at the reception desk, with the confident ease of someone who had been in the role for a month, and had the tenants' names memorized, and the building's rhythms understood. Leo at the doorman's station holding the Heritage's entrance the way he had held it for 22 years, the brass and the marble and the morning light doing what they did when the building was being properly looked after. Martha finished with the peace lily. She picked up her bag and walked toward the entrance. Leo opened the door. She walked through, and he let it close, and they looked at each other for a moment through the glass, the look of two people who have been in the same place for a long time and have the same understanding of what the place is for and why it matters. Then Martha turned and walked out into the city. She was just a quiet old woman in a gray cardigan with a spray bottle and a small bag moving along the sidewalk at the pace of someone who has nowhere urgent to be and understands that unhurry is its own form of intention. The people she passed did not know who she was. They saw the cardigan and the slight stoop of a woman in her mid-70s, and they moved around her the way people move around the things they have assessed as unremarkable. Behind her, the heritage stood in the morning light. The brass caught it the way it always caught it when it had been properly tended, warm and patient and precise. The peace lily's white flower was visible through the tall lobby window, catching the light in the corner where it had always been, where Arthur had said it should be, where Martha had put it in 1989, and where it had been tended every morning since. Derek had thought power was about shouting from the top. He was learning one brass rail at a time on his knees in the morning light that the real power was at the bottom, in the hands that held the foundations together, in the people who showed up before the sun and stayed after the building had finished asking anything of them in the soup, and the kindness and the names remembered, and the withered leaves removed before they could become something worse. Martha disappeared into the crowd. The building behind her stood in the morning exactly as Arthur had intended it to stand. Tended. Warm. Alive. Silence was not weakness. It was just a long and patient breath before the truth. And the truth in the heritage was polished to a shine every morning before the business day began.